This one's wife. You'll never see your grandkids. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. We know that there is no relationship that takes place between this one's wife and her extended family by way of her in-laws in the British royal family. She doesn't bother with her stepmother-in-law, her father-in-law, her brother-in-law or sister-in-law. Her children don't get to see their cousins, to the extent that you accept that the children exist. This underpins the absence of emotional empathy on the part of this one's wife, that not only does she not bother having relationships with those individuals, the reason being is that her narcissism needs to keep her away from them because they're regarded as too great a threat to control, alongside the fact that if she would go to the United Kingdom, she would suffer repeated threats to her control as a consequence of her unpopularity, which she created herself, but also the absence of emotional empathy by denying the children the opportunity to spend time with their relatives. If you accept that the children exist, at some point when they're older, they will come to realize that they missed the opportunity to spend time visiting royalty because they are part of that family. That they missed the opportunity to play with their cousins, to get to know them, to receive the interest of their family, to experience something which very, very few people ever really experience, which is a life of royalty. Whilst they are not fully immersed in it because they live in the United States, they would certainly be able to get repeated tastes of it. For instance, attending marquee events such as Trooping the Colour, attending at Christmas time at Sandringham, seeing the palaces and the castles, seeing all of the pomp and ceremony, experience all of that, not just as an observer, but actually being part of it. And this one's wife denies her children that opportunity. Indeed, when they are older, they may come to question, why were we not allowed? You know, of course, that such a question would amount to a threat to control with regard to this one's wife, and she will respond by claiming that she wanted to have the relationship with the royal family, but they didn't want to know her. Once again, she will paint herself as the victim. She will portray herself as the victim of an unfeeling, uncaring, racist, horrible, colonial family who, in essence, didn't want to deal with her. She will suggest, I repeatedly wanted to introduce you to them, but they didn't want to know. Yes, I wanted us to spend all of those times together, but every time I tried to get in touch with them, they rebuffed me. That's why it didn't happen. And unfortunately, the children are likely to swallow that narrative because, first of all, she may well have drip-fed them that approach as a consequence of them asking questions then when they were little. Furthermore, they will only ever hear her side of the story. They haven't had an opportunity to hear from Charles or William or Catherine or any of the other members of the family to hear their side of the story. They are, in effect, trapped in an echo chamber, meaning that all they will hear is what their mother wants them to hear. Harry, he is too docile in respect of the way that his wife treats him, too supine, and invariably daren't stand up to her to explain the truth of it, because he has swallowed the Kool-Aid and believes part of it himself, and also where he might try to be reasonable and say, well, it wasn't quite like that, that will get him into difficulties with this one's wife. And therefore, typical of many victims of the narcissist, he just wants a quiet life. Furthermore, he's pretty useless, and it's unlikely that he would want to upset the apple cart by arguing against her in this regard and find it simpler to accept her narrative also. Accordingly, the children will only ever be fed one story from this one's wife, which is, I wanted you to have involvement with your family, but they didn't want to know you. And they'll hear that time and time again, and with no counter-argument They will grow up believing it. And this means that they may well end up resenting those members of the family, that they will see them as the problem. And this is a typical narcissistic maneuver, whereby the narcissist feeds a narrative to children, smearing the other parent, for instance, but here extended members of the family, causing the children to believe that they weren't liked, which of course is upsetting for children, to make them believe that the extended members of the family didn't want anything to do with them, when of course it isn't the case. This has been seized upon by another news outlet that goes by the name of Von US, no, me neither, that decided that it would be appropriate to post on a social media platform this announcement. Breaking news. This one's wife has warned King Charles he'll never see his grandkids in cruel dig at dying monarch. Now, once again, this is fake information that has been created by a site such as this for the purposes of getting people to engage with the particular site. It's bollocks. There's no evidence that supports the fact that this one's wife has ever warned King Charles he'll never see his grandkids, because there's no communication between the two of them. It might be the case that she thinks that way, quite possibly, but this headline has been created in order to generate engagement and is once again another example of the misinformation that is pumped out by sites such as this. However, what is interesting is the reactions to this, which tell you quite a bit of how people see the situation involving the children. Alan Caldwell writes, "Don't remember anyone saying he was dying." Terry Barnaby, "No grandkids to see. He's not missing anything. They are rent-a-kids anyway." Steve Harvey, "The King sees his real grandchildren regularly." Ellen Godera, "Oh, you mean the one she got an unlucky bag? You have to laugh." Sisimone Varanachak, "Lilibet is not his grandchild. Anyway, what's different?" Irene Cameron, "He doesn't see them anyway. In fact, no one sees them." Richard Dickinson, "Does anybody definitively know who the children's parents are?" Peter Smallwood, "She means James Hewitt will never see his grandchildren." Nikki Hatch, "Actually her kids will never see their grandfather, the King of England. I think they might have an issue with that in a few years." Sheena Mitchell, "Thought they proved the kids weren't Harry's and therefore not blood related." Margaret Oliver, "He's not dying." Sanye Warosta, "Those kids from this one's wife, the witch, are not his grandchildren." Margaret Bartley, "They're not her children." Roger Wilson, "Nor will her father." Helen Jackson, "That's hilarious. We all know she faked her pregnancies." Chrissy Alana Villian, "That's because she hasn't got any children with the ginger wimp." Carol Minton, "In her dreams." Paul Gilsbear, "It's not his grandchildren." Nanny Noodle, "Imagine being so classless you would try to use your kids as pawns against the King of England." Julie Jackson, "It's hard to see kids that aren't actually real." And there are at least 2,000 comments. And what is interesting is that, putting aside the fact that this is just a headline that is trying to seek engagement and doesn't actually base itself on anything accurate, you will see that there is a prevailing attitude amongst those that have commented upon the article that there are actually no children to see. That actually is a notable theme amongst the comments that appear. Now, I've looked at some of the profiles where the people have commented in that respect, and you can see that they're genuine profiles. It's not generated by bots. But it is interesting to see the extent to which so many people maintain that he wouldn't see them anyway because they don't exist, and in effect that is an empty threat. That more and more people, it would appear, are forming the view that these children do not exist. And it's not difficult to understand why people do. I'm not going to rehash all of the evidence which questions the existence of the children. You're familiar with it. Other than to say, whilst there were aspects of the births and talking about the children which generated suspicion, along with, of course, the old Moonbump saga, the fact is that the recent behaviour of this one's wife of posting the children more often has actually caused more people to question their existence than had done previously. This is because of the discrepancies in hair colouring, locations, size, the suggestion that pictures have been photoshopped, that they are fabrications. And as I explained to you, she can't help but use Instagram. She can't help, because of the growing desperation of clinging to the prime aims, to use the children as a commodity. And the result is the concept of the children, whether they exist or whether they do not, means that she is putting out so much information in relation to them which contains contradictions and discrepancies. It is actually heightening people's belief that the children do not exist. Now, all of this, of course, is fuel for her, and you might think that she's deliberately doing these things in order to invite controversy, because it means that people will still comment about her, and there is some force in that argument. But by the same token, it's challenge fuel, because people continue to query the legitimacy of her children. Now, she doesn't care about the impact that has on the children. All she cares about is, subconsciously, the pursuit of the prime aims. But an article such as this and the reactions to it demonstrate that there is clearly a growing number of people that are starting to believe, as a consequence of the own actions of this one's wife's Instagram output, that the children simply do not exist. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.